This is a house stringer staircase, and we're going to show you how to build it. Follow along with us as we construct a set of shop-built stairs. See all the steps to get your treads and risers mortised into your stringers with accuracy. Check down in the video description for a brief overview of the tools you'll need to complete this project. Like almost any project that requires some math, we're going to start with the layout. I like to use a fine point mechanical pencil for this, to keep the layout lines as thin as possible and reduce the margin of error in our routering. We're going to be laying out the full staircase with our tread and riser template. There are many videos on YouTube that will show you how to make one of these specific to your tread and riser material. I have altered this design a bit to allow me to use it on different pitch staircases. The cleat at the back of the template rides along the stringer material. The downside to my alteration is that you have to remove and flip the cleat to lay out the mirrored stringer. I have two key markings on this template: 10 inches for the tread distance from the previous riser to the face of the riser below. This does not include the tread overhang. Then I have 7 3/4, which is the height of my rise per step. As you slide the template along, you should make a mark at the 7 3/4, then line up the 10-inch mark to it before marking the step below. This really saves time on layout, and should give you an incredibly accurate staircase with as little variance as possible. Continue this down the stringer, and if you make a mistake, be sure to erase it until it's invisible, or flip the stringer over and start again. You should have two perfectly mirrored stringers before we start hogging out mortises. Take your time and double check with the template after you've marked everything. If everything lines up, then the next step is to make some sawdust. I use a top bearing flush trim router bit and take 2 passes per step. The first pass is a shallow 1/4 inch pass to avoid any tear out on the face of the stringer, and the second pass gives me my full 3/4 inch depth of our mortise housing. Pay special attention to the intersection where our 7 3/4 markings lined up with our 10-inch markings. This should be taken slowly because it has a tendency to blow out at that fine point 90, and this will be visible in the finished staircase. Keep a few of these bits on hand because the amount of mortising really takes a toll on these bits, especially into a hardwood species, and they need to be decently sharp to create clean mortises. Make sure you clamp your template down sufficiently to avoid any wander. I find it faster to set the stop on my router to the full depth of our mortise. Then I just eyeball the 1/4 inch depth for the first pass. On the second pass, I drop the router all the way down to the stop and continue. Once you have the first stringer done, just flip the template and repeat. I also like to transfer the 7 3/4 and 10-inch markings to the inside of the mortise for reference during assembly. This is also a good time to check that bit and make sure it's still in good condition. Swap it out if necessary before continuing along. You could use a bigger plunge router with more power to do this task. The reason I use the compact Makitas for this is I have multiple of them, and I just set them all up with the trim bit before I begin. Here you can see my arm hair dust collection system working in overdrive. After the mortising is done, this is where I like to cut the plumb and level cuts of each stringer. Just quickly verify that the stringers are still mirrored and there hasn't been any mistakes during the mortising process. The next thing to do is sand the visible face of the stringers. This is a stain grade staircase, so I also like to sand the top sides of the stringers as well. What I like to do is chisel out the rounded over corner to avoid having to factor it into my tread overhang cope. I use a corner chisel and give it a perfect 90, and then I finish it off with a chisel the whole depth of the mortise. I like to assemble all of my staircases hung. I know production shops don't do it like this, but they also aren't watching a video on how to build stairs. I find it easier to square up and brace the staircase as a whole when it's hung. Now it's time to cut the wedges for the treads and risers. I am using a 5/4 tread and have a mortise width of 1 7/8, so I'll need a wedge to fill the remaining 5/8 and then some, over the distance of about 8 inches. So we head over to our very high-tech wedge jig. You essentially cut a shoulder into a piece of flat stock to seat your wedge material. I have a piece of oak cut down to 8 inches with the grain running lengthwise. This should give me a perfect taper for each wedge. After you run your wedge stock through the saw, you need to flip it over and run it through again to get the second wedge. This squares it back up. Repeating this process ensures that the wedge jig will keep producing identical wedges. I use a series of combination squares to transfer this layout to the tread for the pass-through cope joint for the nosing. This is where having those rounded out corners chiseled away comes in handy. We need the distance from the face of the riser to the shoulder of the tread coping to be exact to help with assembly, but it's better to be short than long on this dimension because the shoulder of the pass-through joint is never seen. I use a smaller combination square to transfer the depth of the cope, but I leave this a 30-second short as well to ensure a tight fit. Transfer those markings to your tread material. You can do this individually for each step, but if the layout was done properly, it should be identical across the board. You can cut this coping joint with a coping saw, a hand saw, or a jigsaw. After that's done, bring it over to the stringers to dry fit it. Repeat this for each tread and use some long clamps to keep pressure along the way. I've straightened the stringer that's closest to my shop stairs. There you can see I've used a plywood gusset to make sure that it stays true. This is when I like to square up the staircase. Calculate the correct diagonal dimension and rack the staircase until you've reached it. I like to pocket screw my risers as well as wedge and glue them. They also get fastened into the back of each tread, creating tight fits all around. Time for the final assembly. I glue the face and side of each wedge so that there is good bond between the treads and risers, but also the stringer. This eliminates squeaks and makes for a solid staircase. I like to wedge them in sequence, so I do the tread below one riser, then I do the tread above it, and I do the riser in between those two treads last. Make sure you get all your glue and wedging done before you fasten your pocket screws or fasten the screws into the back of the tread. On this job, our staircase is going between two walls, so we have the option of fastening through the stringer into the tread material. But this isn't always the case. If your stairs are freestanding, or if only one side is fastened to the wall, you'll have to rely on clamps and wait until the glue has cured. There you have it, a house stringer staircase built from scratch and ready for installation. This is how I do it, but if you've got a better method, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and if you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more how-to videos like this one, and we'll see you on the next build.